Good morning, friends. Let's begin with a prayer together, and then we'll dive into this week's piece of music. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, dearest friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, and our friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow before you all and offer to thee the flower of our heart's devotion, the flower of our sincerity. Accept our offering, accept our love, and bless us with the memory, once again, of your presence, of the higher planes, of the astral worlds, and of your love. Help us to live in that remembrance always, that you are always near, and that our true nature is divine. Om. Peace. Amen. So today we get to talk about one of Swami Kriyananda's perhaps more or less known, more obscure songs, and it's called I Wonder. And it's one that actually I hadn't even heard until just a few years ago. And a friend of mine sat at our dinner table and we were talking about what were some of our favorite songs of Swamiji's, and he mentioned this one. And I said, I don't even know that I'm familiar with it. And he knew it enough to know he loved it, but not enough to remember all the lyrics. So he had to look up the lyrics and then he could sing it to me. And when I heard it the first time, I thought, what a sweet melody, what a sweet song. It has so much in it. And since then, I've got to sing it and gone a little bit more deeply into it. And now it's my great joy to get to share it with you. And if you haven't heard it before, you're in for a treat. And if you had heard it before, maybe this is an opportunity to go a little bit more deep with its vibration and try to understand and allow it to move through you a little more deeply. So this is a song that tells the story of a young boy sitting in his family home and introspecting and allowing the world around him to inspire deeper reflections about the nature of creation and of his own life. And so let's go ahead and listen to this song. We'll sing it together. If you happen to know it, please sing with me. And if you don't know it, just imagine with me that you are perhaps this little boy or this little girl, and you are looking around at the settings of your life and remembering through them perhaps something deeper. And through this song, Swamiji paints a beautiful picture for us, and so let's admire that together. Let's sit upright, let's calm the heart for a moment, and allow this music to reverberate through the chambers of our hearts. Baby Tim's in the nursery, asleep in his playpen, his calico pony close by. It's all set if a dream calls to carry its master away to a calico sky. And I sit by my window and wonder why it's only in dreams we can fly, why a pony can turtle the sunset. Maybe that's what makes small babies cry. Daddy sits in his study and hums with his reading the tune of his favorite song. He tells me his homework seems nicer and lighter with music to lift it along. I sit by my window and wonder why a book has no song of its own, why the world doesn't flood us with music, and why people must sing all alone. Mommy's out in the kitchen, she's making our dinner. I hear by the clink of the pans that she's happy just cooking and knowing we're near her. Her happiness flows from her hands. And I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be, and if people could live without loving. Such a world I hope never to see. And I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be, and if people could live without loving. Such a world I hope never to see. Then just pause for a moment and feel, without labels, without any intellectual understanding, just try to feel for what the song creates in you. Its images, its melody. Where does it leave your heart? And just wonder for a moment, what is that vibration? What is Swamiji trying to tell us through this song? Just like that little boy, we would do well to wonder, to sit by our windows and wonder what the world without Swamiji would be. And this is a beautiful piece of music, isn't it? And there's so many things about it that are delightful. I particularly love the lyrics, actually, and we'll get into that in a moment. And the melody, too, is so sweet and has a few elements in it that, if we tune into them more deeply, can help uplift us powerfully into the vibration of this piece. And the lyrics, of course, at first glance, seem fairly innocent. The first verse is, "Baby Tim's in the nursery, asleep in his playpen, his calico pony close by." And then this is just the narrator describing what he sees. It's that simple. And then he's describing the pony as he says, "It's all set if a dream calls to carry its master away to a calico sky." And isn't that beautiful? That's how he's seeing it, that he's seeing his little brother sleeping in a playpen, and he sees his pony, and he's thinking to himself, oh, the pony's ready, even now, that if in that dream my baby Tim wants to go fly on a pony, that his calico pony will be there. And isn't that wonderful? And then he goes on, "And I sit by my window and wonder why it's only in dreams we can fly. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset." And then he thinks to himself, maybe that's what makes small babies cry. And it's these words, these lyrics of this latter part of the verse are so poignant, they almost make me weep just to even say them. Because this is touching into something so deep, that innocent introspection of a child, that as we grow older, we begin to think, oh no, babies cry because they're trying to communicate with you that their teeth hurt or that they're hungry or something like this. But I think actually Swamiji's touching on a very profound wisdom here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Then the second verse, again, he's just describing what he sees. And he says, Daddy sits in his study and hums with his reading the tune of his favorite song. He tells me his homework seems nicer and lighter with music to lift it along. And we can all appreciate and understand that. And the little boy would say, Daddy, why are you singing? Why are you humming when you read? Then his dad would explain, oh, because it makes it feel nicer and lighter, and it helps it go by faster, son. And the boy is watching that and thinking, interesting. And then he goes on and he's wondering, and he says, I sit by my window and wonder why a book has no song of its own, why the world doesn't flood us with music, and why people must sing all alone. And just to even contemplate those lyrics almost makes me weep, because this is something that I pondered as a boy. Why doesn't the world sing? Why doesn't a flower have a melody? Why can't I hear the sun sing when it rises every morning? I'll go on and I'll come back to that. The third verse, Mommy's out in the kitchen. She's making our dinner. I hear by the clink of the pans that she's happy, just cooking and knowing we're near her. Her happiness flows from her hands. And then he wonders, and I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be, and if people could live without loving. Such a world I hope never to see. And it's that last verse is so sweet, isn't it? So very touching, as now he's not wondering why something isn't as beautiful as perhaps it could be, but he's seeing at last where the divine really is coming in to touch him. And what I was reflecting on when I was considering this song is like the soul remembering the echoes of the astral world. It's like remembering the echoes of a higher reality that we all have within us. And that's what stirs the soul to seek God, is because we inherently know this isn't all that I'm seeking. This material world doesn't have everything I'm after. And it's actually beautiful for me to consider, like in this first verse, he says, why it's only in dreams we can fly. Why is it that mankind for all eternity has always aspired to be able to fly? It's because we can fly. That even your yogis say when we uplift the heart chakra perfectly, we can levitate. But that in the astral world, of course you could fly. And it touches my heart very deeply to think of people like the Wright brothers, who are struggling to in fact fly in this material age. But in their souls, they knew it was possible, because they could remember what that was. And all they had to do was figure out how to make it a reality in this world. But so this song to me is the soul remembering, and is hearing those faintest echoes of God and of your memory of the astral world. The second, and so then the first verse when he's saying, and I sit by my window and wonder why it's only in dreams we can fly. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. Maybe that's what makes small babies cry. And in fact, I think that's true. Master actually said that children weep and wail because they're no longer in the astral world, and that they're stuck once again in this bondage. And we think it's just because their teeth hurt. Well, of course their teeth hurt, but they're also wailing. It's that soul grief of, oh my God, I'm separated from that bliss once again, or at least from that relative freedom of a higher plane. And so maybe that's why small babies cry. Maybe that's sometimes why we feel existential grief, because this is in fact not our home, and that a pony should be able to hurdle a sunset. We should be able to fly, but we're having to remember that. And then the second verse, when he's examining his father singing, and he says, and I sit by my window and wonder why a book has no song of its own, why the world doesn't flood us with music, and why people must sing all alone. But of course, that's actually not true. That everything does have music. Everything does have a vibration. And in the astral world, I think you could sing. You could sing the very world into creation. That's what Brahma does in the myths about creation, is that Brahma sings the world into creation. And that everything is vibration. And this is, like I mentioned, this is particularly poignant for me because when I play music and I lose myself in the music, actually it's quite charming. When I was a boy, I would do it more, but still it sneaks out every once in a while. And if you listen very carefully on these broadcasts, you might catch me doing it. But when I get really into playing my cello, I'll almost forget that I'm playing the cello. And I will spontaneously begin to hum. I'll begin to just start vocalizing in my voice along with the music because it's like my heart recognizes that I am the melody, and so my body begins to try and vibrate with it as well. And what's sort of amusing is sometimes the humming I make is not actually tonal. It's not actually humming the melody, it's just sort of sound. But it's very touching to me. Actually, I know I'm going deep in the music when that begins to happen because it's the spontaneous expansion of the heart. And I had an experience once when I was playing Swami's Life is a Quest for Joy just a few years ago at the 50th anniversary with David E.B. and a number of other great musicians. And I was playing an incredibly simple and boring part out of that incredible piece of music, as I mentioned in a previous broadcast, I think. It's very just rudimentary, the part itself. And yet when I was playing that, I could feel that that moment was one of the reasons I took incarnation in this lifetime, was to be able to bring that music from the astral plane, from the astral sphere into this world, and to help remind people that there is a more beautiful reality that you can live by. And in my heart, playing that music in that moment was so deeply fulfilling because it reminded me of what we would do in the astral planes. And I thought to myself, oh, David, in the astral plane, we would just play music all the time because it would be so beautiful and it would be so effortless. And interestingly enough, even there, one of Master's disciples, who was a great opera singer, she said to Master, oh, when I get to the astral world, I'll just sing, 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 and sing. And Master said, be careful. You don't want to just get stuck in the astral world. We have to go all the way to God. So then in the third verse, the narrator of this song sees his mother cooking in the kitchen. And here his awareness becomes a little bit more subtle because she's just cooking in the kitchen, and yet he realizes simply by the way she's doing it. He says, I can hear by the clink of the pans that she's happy, just cooking and knowing we're near her. Her happiness flows from her hands. And that is so sweet in so many ways, because Swami often talked about that mother's cooking is always best because from her hands flows love. And that this is why you always feel so nurtured when your mother cooks for you, because it's not just the food that you're eating, but it's her love that's flowing into that food and blessing you through it. And this child is realizing this. And in this case, her mother, the child's mother, is also realizing this and is fulfilled in that moment. And then he goes on, he says, I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be. And if people could live without loving, such a world I hope never to see. And it's so touching, this final verse, because in a way, it's like the first two verses are the soul's hearing reflected echoes from the astral plane. And then in this third verse, it's like the soul sees, oh no, it's right here. The divine presence is right here with me. It's just not quite how it was in those other places that I used to be in, but that love still exists, and it flows through my mother's hands, and that is what makes life worth living. This is what makes everything worthwhile, is love itself. And so this is a really beautiful song, and I think teaches us many important lessons, that when we love, when we're an instrument for love, we are bringing down heaven's blessings. And so there's no small act ever in any life, if done with great love. We can transform the world by simply cooking with deep devotion, with deep love for those that we care for. It would suit all of us well to meditate on these lyrics and to consider them. Now, the melody cannot be overlooked, because the melody itself is very sweet and tender, isn't it? And it reminds me of like a small music box. like a child's music box that you would play it, pop it open, and you'd hear a melody like this. And it's very sweet. It's set in a 3/4 rhythm, which is like a waltz, which is very soothing and is also often used as like a lullaby. And so this song is playing with the childlike innocence of our hearts by using these styles that are familiar to us in this way. And then if we listen also, the melody does one thing in particular that I think is absolute genius, which is that there's one phrase where it goes, why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. And the rest of the melody is very, it moves in small increments. It usually ebbs up and then it wanes down. And the melody sort of rises and falls in a very small arena of a scale. But then here he does something different. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. And what he's doing here is these little incremental half steps. That's why hurdle sounds a little different than the rest of the song. It's sort of like this note of tension and intrigue. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. And it's so elegant because that one note requires great attention of the mind. In Indian classical music, they use those intervals, those half-step intervals, to force you to concentrate. Because if the singer isn't paying attention, you'd miss that note. You would sing, how a pony can't hurdle the sunset, and it loses all the intrigue. So you have to pay attention. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. And it also forces the listener to really listen, because the notes are so close together that it takes a sensitive and attentive ear to detect the difference. So Swamiji using this note is really pulling our brain in to concentrate on this moment. And what's so powerful is in the first two verses, that note is on a sort of melancholic phrase. Why a pony can't hurdle the sunset. It's a question. And that use of that note pulls on the heartstrings and is asking why. And this feeling of displacement, that's what it feels to me. And in the second verse, why the world doesn't flood us with music. That one almost makes me weep just to sing. I can barely get it out because my heart resonates with that. Why the world doesn't flood us with music. But then in the third verse, and if people could live without loving, it's pulling the heartstrings to make us realize that we have this love here. And we have it now. Isn't that elegant? So now let's listen to the melody. I'll play it just on my cello. And as we listen together, try and hear the melody is in a way introspective, because it keeps circling in and back around on its own self. And pay attention for that phrase that I was just describing, where we have those small incremental notes, and see what it does to your awareness when you listen to it with deep concentration. Let's conclude together now by singing it one more time. And if you're familiar with the lyrics, sing with me. And if you're not, perhaps close your eyes and imagine that what I'm narrating is actually your own inner thoughts. And that this is the song of your very own heart. Baby Tim's in the nursery, asleep in his playpen, his calico pony close by. It's all set if a dream calls to carry its master away to a calico sky. And I sit by my window and wonder why it's only in dreams we can fly. Why a pony can turtle the sunset. Maybe that's what makes small babies cry. Daddy sits in his study and hums with his reading the tune of his favorite song. He tells me his homework seems nicer and lighter with music to lift it along. And I sit by my window and wonder why a book has no song of its own, why the world doesn't flood us with music, and why people must sing all alone. Mommy's out in the kitchen, she's making our dinner. I hear by the clink of the pans that she's happy just cooking and knowing we're near her. Her happiness flows from her hands. And I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be, and if people could live without loving. Such a world I hope never to see. And I sit by my window and wonder how the world without mothers would be, and if people could live without loving. Such a world I hope never to see. So friends, this week let's listen to the echoes of the astral world reverberating through all life and through our hearts. And let's remember where we come from. Let's remember our potential, and let's remember that God is love.